What?
You're up, Commissioner.
All right, we're back in session. You'll go ahead and introduce yourselves and
I'm Dan Haggard, and this is my wife Sheila Haggard. We're with the Church of Christ, and we're just
He's an elder. And
one of the elders.
I'm just a bookkeeper.
So we're here because we got a notice, to pay taxes on our property. We own the church building, the property there, and then we have like a parsonage or a preacher's house. And in the past, we have not paid any taxes on those. And I guess we missed the notification this year because it was mailed to 53 Orchard, which is the parsonage. Well, there's nobody been living there for almost 3 years. And so we don't normally go pick mail up there. And in the past, when we had a preacher living there, they would go ahead and give us the mail and give us a notification. And I think we had filled it out 2 years prior. And so it just kind of slipped by us, and we didn't know until we got the notification that we had to pay taxes.
it's an annual deal.
It's an annual thing.
And we don't send notices out anymore.
Yeah, and then, well, the letter specifies it's online.
Yeah, but that was last year, and I forgot.
Okay, Commissioner Huff has a question for you.
Okay.
Has the use of the property changed at all?
Not at all, no.
Not at all? Okay. How big is your parish or your?
It's a three-bedroom home. I don't know what the square footage is. I'm guessing about 16 or 1,700 feet maybe.
Okay, and then how many people attend there or use the facility?
How many attend?
Yeah.
At the building, the
Yeah.
church
Yeah,
building?
probably about 60,
Okay.
50 to 60.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. I'm okay.
And you do, like you said, you are a church, you have the right and the privilege of being exempt, but you also have the obligation of submitting the form, because if you don't submit the form, you get the paperwork.
Yes.
And then you get to come visit with us. And we're always glad to see people, but we'll go ahead and make a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that on parcel RP,
There's two of them.
on parcels RPRVS 0000300 and parcel RPRPCPP 034100, that we approve the property tax exemption as requested.
We have a motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So,
We'll write that down on the calendar next year,
all right.
or this
you.
year.
There you go, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, have a wonderful day.
So they need to be done by what, April? Or
April 15th.
April 15th? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you gotta wait a minute. Got people showing up.
I think Tony was gonna come,
Okay.
because he has a lot of vehicles.
Can we go to Shanda?
Shanda's not here. Let's go ahead and go to Ryan.
Well, we could do Emma real quick.
Oh, Emma's here.
Yeah.
Do you want me to text Adam? Because Adam's gonna bring you home.
Ryan's probably got more than just a couple minutes discussion.
I can do half of mine.
Go ahead and get started. You can text him. See when people show up, what's going on.
So I have a couple of papers for you. First, I'll introduce myself. Emma Iannacone, Public Information Officer. So a few weeks ago, Governor Little issued I forget the right term for it, but a declaration banning TikTok from state-owned devices and for state employees to use at work. The issue was that TikTok is owned by China and there are some security concerns. Adam can explain that a little better than I can, but so Adam drafted up a resolution after he and I discussed it. There are two versions here for you to look at. One with a highlighted portion that also includes, hey Adam. Adam, do you want to explain a little bit more the background of why we were discussing this?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Adam McKinney, Chief Technical Officer. So I believe it was about a week and a half ago, we got a directive from the Office of the Governor stating that he had banned the use of TikTok on statewide network equipment. Because we have the courts that are statewide here provided, we were proactive and just went ahead and blocked TikTok at our firewall level. It does not work anymore with the app on, excuse me, I just ran down here, I thought we were last. So we blocked it, it's not available on the Wi-Fi, it's not available on the computer network here. But then Emma had mentioned that she'd been given direction to see about expanding that ban to county-owned cell phone devices. It's a little bit more technically tricky for us to manage those, as we don't have an overarching management for those mobile devices, iPads. We could do it on laptops, we could do it on desktops, but when it comes to cell phones, if they're connected to the county's Wi-Fi, then it blocks that app. But if they're using data, it's a little more difficult for us to block that. We took the governor's executive order and just kind of massaged it for the county. Basically, we put in there that the county would not allow TikTok to be installed on the county-owned devices. But again, it's really up to the individual user to remove it and uninstall it. The language in this we added is basically, we're not going to pay a stipend for it if it's on your county phone. You can't have it on your county phone if it's found on your county phone. Again, we don't know exactly how we'll manage that, but we would in theory be able to take that access from that phone from somebody. I mean, the language has to be a little strong to be definitive, but again, it really comes down to if they're on a data network on a personal phone, it's very difficult. And this is kind of what ISU did as well. They made an edict that said we'll block it at the network level from the Wi-Fi, we'll block it at the network level from the network, but on personally owned devices, it's really on their data, and they can, there's not much way we can manage that.
So I forwarded this over to our legal department to review as well. Unfortunately, I didn't get it to them in time for it to be included in the packet. But Brian did have a chance to look over, and he did have some concerns specifically about the the stipend devices, and how we would, I guess, enforce that. I also have concerns about that personally, just the concern about what else could you ban for people who receive a stipend, but I also understand the argument that if you receive a stipend, you have the option to not do that, and you have the option to receive a county-owned device, so then you could continue to have TikTok or whatever you want on your personal device. So I just wanted to share that legal advice as well.
Yeah, we weren't really sure how you could move forward with, you could put that language in there, but enforcing it becomes very difficult if it's somebody's personal device.
Well, I guess the enforcement part of it comes that if something happens through a county that affects the county, we would know who it was, but according to this, they could lose their job. If they do something that affects the county, that's what.
Adam, what's the data risk associated with this?
If you want my personal opinion as a IT person, I don't feel personally that TikTok is any worse than Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I think they're all the same. I know that it's a hot button issue because the Chinese government has a backdoor into TikTok, but I think that you'll find that type of situation exists with every social media, whether it's China or it's Google or it's the NSA. I think that this is not a bad idea, but I also think that it applies to everything that goes into these devices. And so we can secure the network side of it as good as we can, but at the end of the day, when people put these apps on their phone that siphon little bits of data, there's so many of these apps, and TikTok gets the biggest push because they refuse to open the back end and let the American government see what they're doing. So I understand TikTok to me is definitely a concern for data breach. But that said, all of these apps on these little phones could, in theory, do what TikTok is being. And TikTok just happens to be the hot button one because they've been on it for a couple years trying to open up access and say, what are you guys looking at on the backside of this? And as a private company, they don't want to say, well, we're taking this data and we're taking that data. But all these social media apps do that. Facebook, I would say, is just as big a siphoner of data. I would even say Google, if you own an Android, your Google account itself siphons a good deal of data. Again, I think Commissioner Moser's right. If something came along that we could trace back to being, you had TikTok on your device, this leaked through it, it got out, then you might have some enforcement. But I really think, again, a lot of these devices, a lot of these apps do this type of stuff.
So let me rephrase my question. What would be the sensitive data that someone on their phone
Could get out.
would access that would cause us heartburn?
Email is probably the biggest one. And I do not know if TikTok's permissions, I know on Apple's phones, TikTok is sandboxed, that it can't access certain other things unless you go in and specifically allow it. But I would say email and contacts are probably the two biggest ones that would matter to the county. Any device that's got, and that would be email not in a browser, that would be email on like the Outlook app or the built-in app. A lot of the apps can access what's already downloaded to the phone and possibly siphon that off. But email that was looked at in a browser, like the web email, would not be subject to that. But I would think that would be the biggest open risk vector would be email. And then a list of personal contacts, because almost every app for the phone immediately asks for contact access because it wants to talk to your friends. So.
Right. But as far as sensitive county data, we don't suffer the risk of a breach like we did from somebody clicking on their desktop email and downloading a virus like we had.
Yeah, I don't feel that TikTok poses a threat to internal county assets, i.e. items on our servers and stuff. Even browsing it through the network when you're in a browser and not an app, it does not have any there are permissions that would allow it to do that. I don't feel that's a risk. Again, the biggest risk I think would be email on a county-owned phone, not a county-owned computer, but a county-owned phone that had that app installed. There is a possibility that those emails could get siphoned off.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I can add one thing, going back into the stipend concern, and this is kind of a gray area. There's not one answer here or the other. I'm just kind of looking forward in the future. If someone were to be disciplined for accessing TikTok on their personal device and they were happening to receive a stipend from the county for their incidental use of it for work, what that process would be. Because it's a personal device, it wouldn't be a county-owned device or a county-issued device. Which is different than if they had their own county phone. Now, with the stipend, I'm not sure if there's a contract that the employees sign to get a stipend or not, saying I'll go through this, because if we're saying we're going to give you a stipend, but you can't do X, Y, or Z, I think we'd have a better
And I don't believe there is
case with that.
Yeah.
Or other than that, but if they have to use their phone for county work, for example, if they're on call, but they insist on having TikTok on there, so we're not going to give them their stipend, they use their county phone, then we'd have to look at another way for them to be able to do their work, such as issuing a county phone too, possibly. So there's different things that come into, I just want to make sure the commission's aware of that before the resolution's signed and something happens in the future where this comes back to us.
Yeah, and we only really included it as a framework. We were
Yes.
just kind of looking at what ISU did, what the governor's office offered, and thought, this is a conversation starter really, so.
So I offered up the two resolutions, one with the stipend language and one without, so that we can turn Tuesday if you'd like with.
And that's what the second one was.
Oh, I didn't read that second one.
It doesn't have.
It's not really any different other than it
It
removes
just
the
adds
stipend
that
language.
one, yeah, it just adds that one. And that came from the ISU's press release on how they were gonna handle it. They basically said anything that we're paying for, you can't have it on there. If you're found having it, we'll remove it. But again, they mentioned specifically personal devices that access the network. We can't stop the data use. If you turn off the Wi-Fi on your phone, you can get around that. They've banned it on their Wi-Fi networks though, which is what we've done as well.
See, I'm in support of a lot of that, but I'm kind of with Emma on this. I would feel comfortable, I think we talked about this yesterday, of just saying, if you are the source of a data breach through your phone, then you're subject to discipline up to and including termination. That way we get around worrying about a stipend, but if you can be pinpointed as causing a severe data breach, then
Yeah, absolutely.
that opens you up that way. So you can make that choice. That's where I'm at with this one, Commissioner. Chair.
Well, I think, is there others that we need to include besides just TikTok? I would look at you.
If you want to know the truth on a county-owned device, if you want the tightest security policy possible, we would limit it to county-owned usage only. I mean, we would say, look, this phone is only for, you can have your work email on it, you can have your calendar on it, but you can't have any of these other apps on it. And but again, that becomes difficult to manage unless we have a policy that specifically includes that. And then we would have to circle back around to everybody who's got a county-owned phone. Again, and it might be a spur of a conversation to put some stronger language in for a stipend. I know currently it's just if you've got it in your budget, we just allocate that money. Maybe we need to have some, like a contract type thing that says if you're receiving a stipend, you will not engage in XYZ activity. But again, it becomes that personal. I know that the stipend is about the price of a county-owned phone per month. So the other option would be we just do away with stipends, and if you need a county-owned phone, you get a county-owned phone, and then we manage it. You only have county apps on it. But once those devices go into the hands of people and they've got access to install them, apps are going to go on them. I mean, it's just how it works. So
You're going to need an exclusion though, because Emma does a lot of Facebook stuff.
Yeah.
So you
Well-
would have to exclude people who do.
I don't want to go that far. I want to dictate to everybody. We have policies for county computers, county phones. Follow the policy. And if you're the one that caused the problem because you weren't following the policy, then you'll be disciplined. I mean, but people have to be smart enough to realize that what they have is from the county and utilize it the best that they can.
Well, again,
That's what
I go back to the data breach.
what could they
ability.
get?
Yeah,
Sure.
If the sensitivity of data is strictly email and contacts, okay.
Yep, primarily. I
Because
mean,
you're not gonna be accessing
Yeah.
the financial stuff
Yeah,
on
no.
your phone or anything like that, so.
no, and I don't know of a single incidence where we have anybody who accesses any type of network resources via a mobile device. So, we do have people who watch the camera system via an iPad, but that's a purpose-driven device. And we don't generally have any kind of, I access this network share and I work off my phone. We don't have that. And it really might behoove us to just put that in an overarching policy eventually saying, these work phones are for phone use, not necessarily to do day-to-day tasks on. And if we did that, I think you'd eliminate a lot of that.
No, let's move down that path. I think that's a better path. But I do like the policy, and again, I go back to, if you cause a data breach in any way, then you can be disciplined up to.
Yeah, and I believe that,
termination.
we actually already have that in our IT policy, meaning
That's what I thought.
if you're responsible for data loss, you can be,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
And it'll just be reminders that we put out there a little more often than we have in the past, probably.
So,
That's the way I feel.
So the policy minus number 4,
okay.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Cool.
Great. We will update this version and get it on the agenda for Tuesday for you all. And so then do we need to work on another resolution, or are we good as far as the data breach stuff? Sounds like
I
that's
believe our
already taken
IT policy already has the data breach information. We might want to dust double check and add phone to that, because I think it's probably overarching. I doubt it specifies cell phone in there. But if we included county-owned devices that are mobile, that might just shore that up a little bit. And I'll go back and look at it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's do that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right.
Good.
Looks like everybody's here for a conversation about leases.
Turn off your TikTok, Reed.
Come on up. Dan, do you want to come up on this one too? There's one.
There's chairs up here.
Tori was hiding up there too. Mr. Clauser, Comptroller. I'm here to talk to you about reporting requirements that our office has due to GASB 87. We now have to report leases within our financials. They have changed all of the prior reporting requirements we have. Part of this new reporting standard has redefined leases to include contracts that convey control of the right to use another entity's non-financial asset as specified in the contract for a period of time in an exchange or in exchange-like transaction. So that will be like our vehicles, the parking lot over here, and copiers pending approval of the lease that we can talk about in a minute, or the lease, the policy that we'll talk about in a minute. If you approve that policy, then we can exclude the leases because all of our copiers, if we exclude reporting those, they will not have a financial impact. It's considered de minimis and it won't change our reporting. The item we're here for to discuss is what qualifies as a lease, what doesn't qualify for a lease, and some information that I need so that I know what I have to pick up and what I can't to comply with this. We have non-qualifying leases, which is Idaho Power and the sale of energy. That doesn't qualify as a lease. And then any intangible item, which we don't have any of. Other exclusions could be our short-term leases that are less than 12 months. So that would be the tractor that we lease, the jaw crusher, anything that's less than 12 months that we just use for a short period. Leases that transfer ownership or at the end of the contract may, pending certain criteria, may also be excluded from lease reporting because they may be treated as a financed purchase, which is why we need to review the current leases we have and if we're going to renew them, if we're going to purchase them at the end of the term, or if we're going to terminate the lease at the end.
Shanda. Come here.
Within the lease in the packet that was provided to you, we have a list of all of the leases that we need to make that determination upon and determine what's going to be purchased, returned, or renewed. Per Commission's request, I've asked following individuals to be here to give you what their preference would be to help guide your decision. Ashley's not here, but she let me know what her preference was, so I'll speak to that when we get to it. After we make these determinations, then I'll go back to Teresa with Whiffley and also our contract lease query that we set a contract with to determine what entries I need so that I can help finish up the FY22 financials.
Okay. So, big question is leasing compared to purchasing. And Tony, out there, we talked about you were going to do a comparison somewhat on how's everybody else feel about their leased vehicles and what's going on.
As far as when we first started, we did our first rotation with 5 patrol vehicles with the intention of a $1 buyback. And then the following budget year, we did a residual, which means we can either sell it, have Bancorp sell it, and then we use that residual towards the next whenever that rotation comes up toward the leases, or we can do whatever we want with the residual money. And then this last budget year, we went to the $1 buyback. So we're doing it alternating to see which alternative would be best. But we're still in the third year of the 5-year rotation, so we don't know where we're at yet as far as which one's best. But I would say the buyback would probably be our best option at this point, because generally we give you guys the options of reassigning some of those vehicles, or we rotate other vehicles and get rid of our lesser valued vehicles, or the ones that are really bad shape. So it gives us the ability to rotate some of those vehicles. But I think you can do that with the lease return as well. So I think you still can have the option to buy it out at the end of the year. So
The enterprise ones, the intent was, because we needed an intent, and the intent on the enterprise ones was to renew that lease, to always have updated safety features and the most efficient, gas and things like that on them. But then to right size, to say, I think all of the enterprise ones are set at 5 years right now. Right, if there's something more, I talked to Bobette briefly yesterday about if there's something that we need to extend and maybe go a 7-year term before we turn it back. But that was the initial setup for all of those enterprise, was that we would just continue and release and have those assets being new.
and ours are 5 as well.
Is there an option on them leases though for a buyback, or there's no way we can do that?
So when I talked with Christy, when I talked about Bed, I sent her that we would need to talk with Christy about if we wanted to adjust that intent and what that would entail. And then I also need to get with Enterprise to understand, because they also needed to know what we intended to do when we initially signed that contract. So if we adjust it, I think there's a conversation to be had, but we need to travel down both of those paths.
Because we've got 8 fleet vehicles right now leased. We have 30 total vehicles for Public Works. To me, like from the information, we need more numbers, but for like the remaining, we're still working on numbers to see which is better, but to me, it's looking like I'm looking at buying for them small vehicles, just for the fact that we have 20-year-old vehicles, 16-year-old vehicles that are working, but I'm looking more at a 10-year rotation. But then for 8 vehicles, or for 6 vehicles, I'm paying $56,000 in lease per year for 6 vehicles. If I have to try to get these 30 vehicles updated, I'm gonna have a huge lease payment versus me trying to look at buying like 3 vehicles a year. With 30 vehicles, I'll rotate them out every 10 years. I might be $150,000, but if I try to do lease, what my problem that I'm working on right now is if I'm leasing that many, my payment per year is going to be pretty large.
And I believe that was the same situation we had with the sheriff's office, because we were budgeting to purchase 5 vehicles, and the cost of what it costs, the cost of purchasing was going to be less than the 5-year, by the time we had 5 years worth of leases and constantly having leases, that payment was going to be more than the outright purchase.
Right.
But if the intent was to cycle the vehicles down, we would want to purchase. But if it was to always have new vehicles so that patrol had reliable vehicles, then the purchase was the option. So it just kind of depended on, at least my recollection, was the intent of the vehicle. So like with Ashley Bringhurst at D6, they put a lot of miles on the vehicles. She would prefer to keep leasing because then she's always got a good vehicle. Anita and I talked this morning. She's got 10,000 miles on a vehicle, and we've had them for 1.5 years.
Yeah, well, yeah, about a little over a year.
Yeah. So does it make sense if you're not putting a lot of miles to lease when you can have a vehicle for 10 years and it be good, and just keep a rotation of vehicles versus sheriff's vehicles or vehicles that are used a lot, to make sure that they're...
There was 2 things when we started
Right.
with the lease deal. we had a lot of vehicles that
Yeah.
Road and Bridge says, get them off the property. They are outdated and they're not safe. And so that was a big process of having the safety factor in there of when they go out, they have a good vehicle to drive. But we need to utilize the vehicles too. If got a leased vehicle, I don't want it sitting. I want it out on the road being utilized. You turned one back because
Yeah.
of the same, that situation.
Well, and I can speak for us. We have, right now we only have one leased vehicle. We had two, we have one leased vehicle. We're a little bit hamstrung because it's one of our only vehicles that has a gooseneck that we can take, that we can haul the trailers that we have in. So I kind of feel like we have to hang on to something like that. But it's got 8,000 miles on it after almost 3 years. And we just don't use it. Now, if we would have purchased that vehicle, we would have kept it for a long period of time because we're just not putting a lot of miles on it. But we have to have a vehicle like that. We have to have that type of vehicle. I think a simple math equation, like Kyle brought up, is if you have X amount of vehicles, and, let's say 20 vehicles, and you've got them on a 10-year rotation, and you figure out you're going to need to replace 3 vehicles every year, does it cost that much, or does that cost less than leasing 20 vehicles a year? And if that cost of replacement, because you've always got to be replacing vehicles, is lower, then it will be that lease every time. But in some areas where you have a ton of vehicles to lease and a ton of vehicles to replace, I think that's where leasing becomes a more valuable or more viable option. And obviously staying on top of some of your fuel economy. And the one thing that I think we find with leases this year, at least the last couple of years, is you don't have as great of a selection, so you get the vehicles that they have, not necessarily the vehicle that you need, or the vehicle that's the closest to the one you need, I should say, right? And so that's because we're gonna come to the end of the lease on my vehicles here in a little bit, and they're gonna have 15,000 miles on it, and I'm not gonna be any closer to having, because I still need what that truck offers.
Is there a buyback option on that?
There could be, but to be honest with you, I wouldn't buy it.
No.
Just because it's not the truck that we needed for the job, right? So got an 8-foot bed in it. It's a full cab. It's got the off-road package, right? Like it's got stuff that, quite frankly, I just need a short box, probably a 1-ton truck that can just do the job. And
it's not fuel efficient, is it?
No, it's not. And so like I said, we drove it because we wanted to use it, but we got the vehicles that the sheriff's office handed over, and so since then it's sitting even more. So.
And part of the problem in the past with our aged fleet was just not funding constant renewals or not having a good practice of keeping up on them. Sheriff's office always did a good job of keeping up on vehicles. Road and Bridge did for a while, and then there were some cutbacks made. So it's also prior budgetary decisions that did not keep up on the fleet.
I think Ag Extension would fall more with these guys, where we would say we could keep their vehicles longer and own them. Would make more sense for Ag Extension.
So maybe that's the decision factor, is the amount of usage.
Yeah.
If we're going to take our high mileage people, Tony, I would say Tori probably fits into that. You guys are going to be looking at a lease so we can keep a better equipped vehicle there. But if it's like Scott, 1,000 miles a year, and it's more of a heavy duty thing that we can keep for 10 years, maybe we make that change.
And it's been a good thing for, if you got it, like you were saying, we had such a old fleet going on, like with us with our larger equipment, that lease has really saved us because we were so far behind. Now we bring it up. But then you also, even in large equipment, we have some, like you're saying, I have like an excavator that only gets this many hours, and I'd probably like to buy it back versus something like a compactor that gets completely beat up, but that lease is perfect for it. So you're gonna have both a little bit, but.
And we do need to look at usage. Sorry, also, when Ag Extension talked, when we went to go do the van, there was some hurdles in transporting juveniles.
Yeah, that was a deal, yeah.
Yes, so we do need to look at sometimes usage also and mileage and
That's
whether
another
it
reason why we'd
fits.
like to own them. And then the other thing I say, if we're gonna own them longer, we just need to make sure and be really cognizant. We are, and I think everybody is, but make sure that we get them in there and get them serviced, because we're owning those, so the servicing becomes more important.
Well, I think we're then at a point that when you present your budgets, you come with either or and the options of how does it save the county money either way. We'll throw it back in your lap. And then to go along with that, I'd like to know how many vehicles you each have, who drives them, who takes them home, what the, you know, how are we following county policies and procedures? That'll be part of your budget package as you bring them forth, but.
Okay. So to get back to what I need for financial reporting, I just need to know if all the enterprise are set that we're going to renew the lease. And if that's the intent, then that's how I need to treat these. But then we can go to, and Tony's, his intent is to buy back some, or dollar buy back some, and then
Residual. so
residual. What did you do on the van?
That is a residual. Wait, I've got it right here.
So if you send in your information about how many vehicles you have and how many are leased, and we'll get that both to the commission and to Christie,
Okay.
of what your intentions are on each one of them.
Van's a buyback. Sorry.
I mean, that's what you need, is the information on each one of them,
Well, I
right?
think we're gonna need the information from Enterprise, whether we can even buy them back for what you're looking for.
Well, right now, the intent with enterprise is to renew the lease. So that's how I will
Okay,
function for my reporting that I need today.
so you have that information that you need.
Right. And then now we have more clarification on
Going forward.
budget, how you guys need to do things.
Okay.
And then on on Summit, which is just
Large.
the compactors, the intent is to renew the lease.
And I can go through that list and if you want.
Okay.
And I'll let you know which one.
Perfect.
What our intent is.
Okay, that work?
Yeah,
Christine,
yeah.
can I ask how often do you do that? Is it an annual thing or is it?
It's annual reporting.
Okay, so then as we go to do the budget, if there's changes made, then we catch it up the next time you report.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll just write it
perfect.
down through the budget process.
Gotcha.
This is just new reporting requirements for this year, or last year, that we have to get done.
When is that report due?
March 30th with our financials. Unless I get an extension, which was most likely going to have to happen. Okay. Tori, you good? Good, good.
So then for
Everybody?
the, as part
What
of the
about-
budget process,
Real quick, Daniel?
On mine, I got like a plow truck that gets beat up so bad, we probably want to
Renew.
keep leasing.
Okay.
We have a electrician truck that we're looking at getting rid of, going with something maybe more fuel efficient, so we've got to figure that one out.
Okay.
First one we looked at was actually more expensive to switch it out. And then the other trucks for pulling a trailer, and that one's getting 5,000 miles a year is all,
Okay.
but we need it for that purpose. But,
Okay, so you can just address it in the budget?
yep.
And Evie?
I think, well, with ours, I think we could go either way because we do have some out of town. We only have one lease vehicle. We do have some out of town for training, but again, if we needed something, if we purchased this vehicle and it wasn't necessarily that it was top in safety or whatever, we can always get a commissioner car or whatever. So most of ours is just driven around town for home visits when probation officers are out in the field. So it's pretty minimal as well.
Okay.
And all out of town, we have our pool,
Right.
so that's a,
And we can pull up from our dossier on mileage too, if anybody needs to know anything like that, whether it be more efficient for lease or purchase, just through servicing.
One of the things I did learn through this process of going through the leases is we don't necessarily have a good feel for how much it would cost to purchase versus lease. So I think at the inception of the decision, we need to maybe review that.
Yeah, that's where I was going when it comes time for budget time, and if you're talking a lease versus a purchase, some kind of analysis so we can make that decision of, okay, like the sheriff, I know we talk about, you know, we're anticipating our Tahoes being a high resale value. Okay, what is that?
Right.
Work our way through that.
I was surprised what we got for the ones we sold recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man,
Kind of like what we
we
did
got a
with
lot of money for them.
that grader, the last one,
Yeah,
whether we
that's
were
what we
going to purchase it or lease it, and it was, we hashed that out.
Yeah.
Which way to go.
And in the past, when we bought equipment, I know we've done trade-ins and done okay maybe, depending on what we turned in.
Scott?
Well, so, like, if I just took the truck that I have, you know, and we only lease that one vehicle, and I'm sure it's the same for some of the departments, they only lease 1 or 2 vehicles. Like, the lease payment on that is about $18,000 a year. And granted, over 5 years, I could pay for a full truck. From a budgetary cycle, we don't roll that $18,000 over every year. And so that makes it more difficult to say, once every 5 years, you guys gotta give me $100,000.
But
That
that's
makes
what
it hard to
And that
budget.
was the deal when we talked about leasing, is because every department had, I don't know, a few vehicles
Uh-huh.
that hadn't been moved forever, but they was there, and we didn't get
Yeah.
any value out of them,
So like on
and
Kyle's,
they weren't worth driving.
when Kyle's saying, we're gonna set a rotation, then we're gonna do 3 vehicles a year,
It's easier to
every year,
budget.
it's easy to budget, because that stays the same. The fewer vehicles, it makes it more challenging.
Makes it budget.
But you're talking about different funding sources.
Sure.
So reserves pay for one-time purchases. So if we can anticipate, knowing we're gonna need that,
Yeah.
then we can work that into the process. Whereas with Tony, we were buying every year, and we were buying this many. That was actually an ongoing cost, even though it was a
Yes.
capital purchase.
So I
So-
always give you a heads up,
Yep.
at least a year. And
You usually do a
2
couple of years.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so that helps anticipate some of that, but we can work through that through the budget cycle.
Okay.
But we should take ownership and say, hey, we know this car is getting to be 10 years old, and we should send that to you, so you don't have to keep track of people's cars.
Right, and then we can include that as projections forward, and do a better job of a 3-year anticipated budget process.
That's what we're trying to work on too, because then we have like the 30 small vehicles, but then we have 38 like 10-wheelers dump trucks. So it's kind of, it would be, I want to get to something that I can budget a little easier.
That's what we've done with the ambulance too.
Yeah.
is We have a rotation on them, so.
Okay, that takes care of the vehicles. And then I'll work with Kyle on the equipment. The other items, which doesn't necessarily pertain to most people that I've got to report on, are going to be the cell towers, which we may be able to exclude. And this is us as a lessor. We may not have to report on that. I need to double check on the McNabb gravel pit. We may have to report that as a lease. And then as a leasee, the billboard we have up at the event center, we do not need a report on because the exchange value is not an equal value. So that one will be excluded from the original list we had. However, the 911 towers, where we have our cell towers, we're going to have to report those. And then I need to check on the railroad leases because we don't have control, but there is a lease of the land. So that's all I have on this.
Okay.
So everybody else can hang out, but the next item I have that we need to talk about is that policy.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. I'm gonna go recess, I want to talk to Tony.